By far the #1 place that you guys ask me about is Fort Lauderdale and what the best neighborhoods are. And honestly, it's been a while since I've made a video like this. And today I'm breaking it all down, covering the 7 best neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale based on real client stories to help you figure out which one may be the best fit for you. So a lot of you really seemed to like the last video I did where I broke down the top 8 best areas to live in South Florida and based it on real client stories and why they chose to live there. I got a lot of good feedback on that style of video, and to be honest, I kind of like breaking areas down better that way than just spitting out boring facts that you could find on Wikipedia. So today we're gonna dive back into Fort Lauderdale and cover the 7 best neighborhoods that our clients chose and what their biggest anchor was, specifically what drew them into that neighborhood. So drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what your big anchor is. And as always, if you're considering a move to South Florida, whether you're buying or selling, we would love to connect with you and help you in any way that we can. But without wasting any more time, let's get into the first neighborhood, which is Coral Ridge Country Club. I spoke about Coral Ridge in the last video. This time I want to speak specifically about Coral Ridge Country Club Estates and the Thompsons who reached out to us from Miami. They were living in a small condo near Turnberry Country Club, but they wanted more space. Not only that, but after that whole condo fiasco, especially in this particular area of Miami, Aventura to be specific, they just wanted to get out. So we looked at single family homes in the area in Aventura, but nothing was really checking the boxes. They couldn't find the space that they wanted. And at the time, Fort Lauderdale wasn't even on their radar. But they remembered their big anchor, which was country club style living and access, which is really something that they did not want to give up. And Coral Ridge Country Club Estates has all of that, maybe not quite the same level of access, but it's a completely different vibe all around. And one of the things they really loved was how this neighborhood felt tucked away, but was still only 5 minutes to 2 different beaches, had the opportunity to either live right on the golf course or on the water with direct ocean access, and it had a really diverse style of homes, from custom built estates to mid-century modern, all the way to brand new luxury builds in the enclave. And these homes are on pretty large lots compared to Coral Ridge just south and the rest of Fort Lauderdale. As far as access goes, they did compromise a little bit because they're not right up the street from the Aventura Mall anymore, but they are only about 10 to 15 minutes from downtown in Las Olas and maybe about 5 to 10 minutes from Wilton Manors. And to be honest, their life actually got a lot less hectic because they don't have to deal with that Aventura traffic anymore and sit in a gridlock just to go grocery shopping. And the Thompsons didn't have kids yet, but they did understand the value in buying a home in an area with good schools for their future kids and for resale value. And Coral Ridge Country Club Estates is near some of the top private schools in all of Fort Lauderdale. You have Cardinal Gibbons High School, which is right there in the neighborhood, and then Westminster Academy and Pinecrest, which are both in Imperial Point, which is our next neighborhood on the list. And our clients, Shati and Austin, who relocated here from New Jersey with their newborn baby. So when they first reached out to me, like a lot of people, they didn't really know exactly where they wanted to be. They just knew they wanted to be in the general Fort Lauderdale area, close to a beach, and in a quiet, low traffic neighborhood, somewhere where they can go out for walks and ride their bikes. Now, I just want to point something out real quick. A lot of people come to us with the request of being close to the beach, and that can mean a lot of different things depending on where you're coming from and what you're used to. Somebody who's moving from Texas may think that an hour is close to the beach, while somebody from Southern California may think a 15-minute drive is too far. Shati and Austin, like myself, were both from North Jersey, and the closest beach to us was an hour and a half to 2 hours. So really being anywhere in the Fort Lauderdale area was being close to a beach. And based on what they were looking for, we started looking a little bit further out west in some of those quieter areas with low traffic, still within a 30-minute radius to the beach, until we stumbled upon this hidden gem in Imperial Point. And this neighborhood was exactly what they were looking for. A quiet neighborhood with low traffic, but still just west of US 1 and 10 minutes from the highway, and most importantly, only a 10-minute drive to the closest beach, which is Lauderdale by the Sea. Imperial Point really gives you that suburban vibe. I mean, a majority of the homes were built in the 60s and 70s, and it's mostly single-family ranch-style homes. And while a lot of these homes have been purchased and renovated over the last 5 years or so, I did mention that most of them are single-family ranch style, so on the outside, you may not see a ton of variety or character when it comes to the style of the homes. And I do believe that Imperial Point is often overlooked as one of the top neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale because of the so-called lack of character and the fact that it's the furthest north in the city that you can go. And it's overall just not in a lively area. But that's exactly who this neighborhood is for. Someone like Shotzi and Austin, whose biggest anchor wasn't to be in a lively area right in the middle of it all, but to be somewhere that was quiet, kind of low key, but still 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from the lively areas and 10 minutes to one of the top beaches in the entire state. But if liveliness and character is something that you're looking for, like Mike and Sarah, then you're gonna wanna pay attention to this next neighborhood, which is Victoria Park. Mike and Sarah were from Chicago, but the north side of Chicago, I think in an area called Lincoln Park or something like that. And according to them, it was very charming, very walkable, but still very close to the city. So when they reached out to us, they wanted to keep that feel of the historic charm while still being close to the downtown area. That was their big anchor. And there was a couple of different areas that we were able to look at, like Rio Vista and Coral Gables, which was maybe a little bit too far out for them, but as soon as they saw Victoria Park, they immediately fell in love. And if you've been a follower of this channel for some time, you've probably heard me say a million times that Victoria Park is one of my favorite, if not my favorite neighborhood in all of Fort Lauderdale. And it's for the exact reasons that Mike and Sarah fell in love with it. Victoria Park's one of the oldest neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale, so the charm is definitely there, whether it's a classic bungalow, Key West style home, or just the mature tree-lined streets. You'd never know that you were only a 5-minute drive from downtown, and depending on where you live in the neighborhood, potentially walking distance to Las Olas. Now you might be watching this video because you're already sold on Fort Lauderdale, but you just need a little bit more info on some neighborhoods, but maybe you just landed on this video and you have no idea where you want to be in South Florida. And that's exactly why we created the Ultimate South Florida Relocation Guide, which is the one resource you need if you're considering a move to South Florida. It's over 30 pages of lifestyle, transportation, local hotspots, you name it, it's probably in there. Plus our area guides to help you figure out which area of South Florida might be the best option for you. We've gotten really good feedback on this since we released it a couple weeks ago, and if you're unsure about the area in general, I highly recommend that you grab your free copy. The link for it will be in the description. And if you do download it, let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if you hate it, or if you want us to add something to it. Next up is Tarpon River. So we're staying around the downtown area, actually just southwest of downtown. So this one was kind of a no-brainer for us given the circumstances, but Kevin is originally from New York City. He's in finance, and Rachel is an attorney, and she is born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. Kevin is able to work remotely at his job, so he was spending a few months at a time down here in Florida, living that snowbird life kind of, but still working. And then he would travel back up to New York, and he spent a couple years doing that until he just finally had enough and decided to move down here full time. And when I met them, they were living in Flagler Village, and they really liked the lifestyle that Flagler Village brought. But when it came time for them to actually decide to buy a home, Flagler Village didn't have what they were looking for. And if you don't know, Flagler Village is a majority of rentals, and the buying options there are somewhat limited. So their big anchor was finding a unique kind of home in a trendy, small, local type atmosphere that's close to downtown and close to Rachel's office, but without that Las Olas price tag. And that's exactly what Tarpon River is in a nutshell. It's a quiet, tight-knit community that feels laid back, but connected at the same time, with small cafes, popular local breweries like Tarpon River Brewing, and some really nice waterfront parks. And it has those unique homes, those old, historic Florida charming homes, modern townhouses, and waterfront properties on the new river with direct ocean access. And the great thing about it is you can really find homes across all price points in this neighborhood. The downside is that people love it here so much that the turnover is not really that great. So we had to keep an eye on these listings. Location-wise, it just made sense for them. Rachel's office and the courthouse is walking distance, so no more having to cross that bridge. Overall though, the location is just great with really good access to downtown. Davie Boulevard just to the south will take you right to I-95, and you could actually take back roads to the airport from here and beat out a lot of that traffic on US 1. Next up is Poinsettia Heights and our clients Lisa and Matt. So when Matt and Lisa first reached out to me, you can say that they were a little bit stressed. Matt had just received a job offer down here, a pretty big promotion that required him to leave Atlanta and move down to Fort Lauderdale. And they had visited Florida a few times on vacation, but weren't really familiar with Fort Lauderdale, and living here was a completely different story. Lisa wasn't too thrilled, to be honest. But in Lisa's words, they needed something that felt like home, but still fit their lifestyle and Matt's daily commute. And after a few Zoom calls and phone calls, it became obvious that their biggest anchor was balance. They didn't want something so quiet, like family focused, like you would find out in the suburbs, but they also didn't want to be in a really tourist heavy area. Lisa worked remotely, so she was stuck in the house for most of the day, so she wanted a neighborhood where she could just go outside and walk, somewhere peaceful, somewhere quiet. Maybe she could just sit on her front porch and drink coffee in the morning. Matt, on the other hand, was scarred by the traffic that he used to sit in Atlanta, so he needed to be somewhere close to downtown where his new office was gonna be, and he didn't want to spend half his day commuting like he used to do in Atlanta. And what drew them to Poinsettia Heights right away was it was a place that had character but wasn't overly flashy. It kind of has this authentic mid-century Florida feel, kind of hard to explain, a mix of older ranch style homes that had been renovated into these really cool modern residences, but still keeping that old school charm. And they loved how every house felt different, from its landscaping just to how the house was renovated. It didn't have that modern boxy cookie cutter feel. It has that centralized location without being in a tourist heavy area. And Matt's office, like I said, was downtown, and from Poinsettia Heights, his commute would be just about 10 to 15 minutes by car or bike. And they were also only 10 to 15 minutes from the beach, which really wasn't a big deal for them. And then when I mentioned that Poinsettia Heights was kind of sandwiched right in between Wilton Manors and Las Olas with some of the best restaurants, nightlife, and shopping, sold. It checked every box, close to work, close to fun, but still peaceful enough to feel like home, just like Lisa wanted. Now let's get into some waterfront communities and talk about the Landings. And David was relocating from Boston, getting ready for retirement, and he had spent a majority of his adult life living in downtown Boston in a really congested area in a high-rise condo. Not a lot of space, so he was just ready for a complete change. And his biggest anchor was privacy, something that offered luxury waterfront living, but without the crowds, traffic, or the tourism that comes with being too close to downtown. With that, we knew that the Las Olas Isles were out of the question. I mean, as great as those areas are, he was trying to avoid that. We checked out a few different neighborhoods, and the one we ultimately landed on was the Landings, which is a quiet, upscale community with deep water canals and direct access to the intercoastal and the ocean without any fixed bridges. And what David loved most was, unlike some of the bigger, more well-known waterfront neighborhoods that kind of feel ultra modern or kind of over the top, the Landings has this great mix of mid-century modern homes, newly renovated, bigger estates, and then you have your custom-built luxury homes. And the lots here are also pretty large compared to some of those other waterfront communities closer to downtown, which meant more space, more privacy, and just overall quieter atmosphere. And location-wise, it made perfect sense for him. I mean, he didn't really have to commute anywhere because he was gearing up for retirement, but in the off chance that he did want to grab dinner or go have a drink somewhere, he was 5 minutes from Lauderdale by the Sea, or 10 minutes from the Galt Ocean Mile, which he said is kind of more his style anyway. It's also just east of US 1, so he was situated in this little tucked away corner, giving him great access to everything. And that's one of the great things about these neighborhoods that I describe as tucked away, is that proximity-wise, they're in great locations when it comes to commuting, but once you're in the neighborhood, you feel like you're kind of just far away from everything. Rio Vista is quintessential Fort Lauderdale. When the Ricci family first reached out to me, they were moving from Washington, D.C., that general area, Northern Virginia to be specific, and they had one big goal in mind, AKA their big anchor, which was finding a neighborhood that had character and was luxurious, but wasn't cookie cutter suburban like what they were used to back in Virginia. They also wanted a strong sense of community, a place where they can raise their future kids, walk to local parks, stuff that you would typically find out in the suburbs, but they also wanted the benefit of waterfront living. And we explored Victoria Park and a couple neighborhoods out in Miami Shores, but they weren't really sold on the Miami area, to be honest, but Victoria Park was an option until they saw Rio Vista. Similar to Victoria Park, Rio Vista is one of Fort Lauderdale's oldest and most charming neighborhoods, with homes built as early as the 1930s, a lot of Mediterranean style estates and some really extravagant waterfront mansions. And it houses some of the priciest real estate in all of Fort Lauderdale. But the streets are lined with these massive oak trees, giving it a small town feel, which is what they were used to in Northern Virginia. And it's one of the few neighborhoods in the area with sidewalks, giving it that extra added layer of safety. And it may not seem like a big deal, but if you're familiar with Fort Lauderdale, or maybe you're not if you're watching this video, a lot of these neighborhoods that I've mentioned, and just a lot of neighborhoods in general in Fort Lauderdale and South Florida, they don't have sidewalks. So it's a pretty big deal when you find a neighborhood like this in the city, in an established area that has sidewalks. You're literally right outside of downtown Fort Lauderdale and walking distance to the Riverwalk. But again, it's one of those neighborhoods that when you're inside of it, you would never know you were actually in the heart of the city or right in the downtown area. And they love that they could be at Las Olas in 5 minutes, at the beach in 10, and in the airport in about 15. And for boaters, it's hard to beat. Rio Vista overall just has some of the best waterfront properties in the entire area, and it's really close to the inlet. Now, even though each of these clients had different stories and chose different areas, they all had one thing in common, which was they knew what their big anchor was. And once they had that clarity, we were able to help them put the pieces of the puzzle together to solve the rest. And if you're considering buying or selling anywhere in South Florida, my team and I would love to be your real estate resource of choice. We want to hear from you, talk about your goals, help you process everything, and then help you put the pieces of the puzzle together to help make your next move in South Florida your best one. And if you're still unsure about which area in South Florida may be best for you, I recommend you check this video out, and we'll see you on the next one.